done by.
Hello po, ito po si Dallas Jenskin, ang author, director, writer, producer ng The Chosen. Kung hindi niyo pa napapanood ang The Chosen, please watch. It's a very wonderful movie. Nakaka-revive po siya ng paglilingkod, ng pagmamahal natin sa Panginoon. Ano po. So, watch it with your family and pag-usapan niyo siya afterwards. So, ito po isang interview na napanood ko po in regards kung paano po nagumpisa ang The Chosen, and God really, that's why ano po, I publicize it or I encourage each and everyone dahil this movie, The Chosen, was created out of a revelation. Wow! Pag ang isang movie ay nanggaling sa kapahayagan ng Diyos, ano ho, para sa kanyang sarili, kanyang kapangyarihan, it must be a watch movie sa lahat ng mga Kristiyano. So, pakinggan po natin yung testimony, and every now and then magko-comment po ako to give an insight at para maging maliwanag po ang ating pag-usapan sa araw na ito. Ito po yung mentoring po natin. Sige po, pakinggan po natin.
Great partners. And then Universal Studios got involved and Walden Media got involved. And the plan was to do multiple movies over the next 10 years, faith-based movies that we would control the content. Because I didn't, of course, want to give control of the content to companies that didn't love the Lord. And so they were like, no, you control the content. We're all good. We will finance it. I mean, it was unbelievable. And then opening weekend came for the resurrection of Gavin Stone. And Friday morning, the numbers came in, and it was a bomb. And in 2 hours, I went from being a director with a very bright future, who'd finally made it in Hollywood, to a director with no future. Because they had no incentive to keep going. They went back to doing what they did best, horror films and wrestling and whatnot. And so I was left with my wife at home at an extreme low point. Not Detroit Lions low, but a low point.
Okay, siya po in-hire ng malalaking kumpanya upang gumawa ng multiple movie, at siya po yung bahala kung anong kanyang gustong ilagay sa content ng mga movie o message, ano po, and it's a Christian message po ang kanyang gagawin. But the first movie na ginawa po niya ay pumalpak po siya. Wala pong nanood. Ano ho, so he is a promising director, parang potential po siya nasisikat, and yet ngayon parang nagiging malabo na. So ngayon, sabi nga po niya, nasa lowest point ako ng buhay ko, umuwi ako, umiiyak kaming mag-asawa, nanalangin. So pakinggan po natin.
Thank you for coming.
Yes, and that's the end of the story. It was all set up for that. That's the only reason I came. No. But I was at a real low point. I really was. And my wife and I were crying and praying and wondering how we could have gotten to this place. And I remember being so confused and hurt because I was essentially being told thanks, but no thanks anymore. And my wife, God bless her, who I think is even more in tuned than I am many times, God pressed so powerfully on her heart 2 things. One was the miracle of the feeding of the 5,000. And the other one was, I do impossible math. Now, again, we're Baptists. We don't hear God's voice, audibly. But it was as powerful as if it was audible. And we didn't know what it meant, so we looked into the feeding of the 5,000, and we just knew that was what God was pressing on our heart. And we've heard that story hundreds of times. But what was so powerful about it this time was we noticed something we hadn't noticed before, and it was that God actually was responsible not only for the miracle, but for the need for the miracle. He knew they were exhausted and tired. In fact, the disciples came to him and said, we need to get these people food. We need to send them home. And Jesus said, oh, they're so hungry. If we send them home, they'll faint along the way. He knew it. In fact, it was his fault. He was the one who'd been talking so long that he'd gotten them that hungry. He got them to the place where the only thing left was a miracle. Then, of course, he could have just magically produced food in all of their laps. He could have just waved his hand like I just did, and all of you in this room, just like back then, could have had food sitting in their laps. But he had them go find 5 loaves and 2 fishes. Or 2 loaves and 5 fishes, which is it? You'd think I'd know this because it's so powerful, I promise. 5 loaves and 2 fishes, yes. So he, sorry.
He's a Baptist. He doesn't know everything, you know. I mean,
Touche. So 5 loaves and 2 fishes, and then when he multiplied it, he had them go and distribute it. He had them do everything that he didn't need them for. Now, combined with the phrase, I do impossible math, we thought that perhaps that weekend, the numbers were going to magically turn around, and this miracle was going to happen, and God's glory was going to be shown to these agnostics and atheists out in Hollywood, and they were going to see that this was a miracle. And that didn't happen. It actually got worse. But that night, at 4 o'clock in the morning, I was on my computer, and I was writing a 10-page memo about all that went.
So, doon po habang nasa low points ng kanilang buhay dahil nga pumalpak yung movie, and as they prayed over, ang asawa po niya ay nakatanggap ng mensahe kay Lord, or nag-impress yung message ni Lord sa kanya in regards dun sa pagpapakain ng Panginoon ng 5,000 tao sa pamagitan ng 5 tinapay at 2 isda. All the while, iniisip nila na, and then nagkaroon pa nga pala ng karagdagang mensaheng Diyos sa kanya, that God do impossible math. That God does impossible math. Okay, so all the while iniisip nila na gagawa ng milagro si Lord, na parang biglang may manonood sa kanyang ginawang film at dadami ang bilang. But then it turned out na hindi po yun. Wala pa rin nangyari. So, sige, patuloy po nating pakinggan ang kanyang testimony.
I was analyzing what I did wrong. I was analyzing what they did wrong. I was breaking down everything that we should have done differently. And a message popped up on my Facebook feed at 4 in the morning. Didn't say hello. And it wasn't even a friend of mine that I know very well. I'd never actually met him. We were just Facebook friends. We talked maybe once a year. And it said, remember, your job is not to feed the 5,000. It's only to provide the loaves and the fish. And I remember, sorry, I still get emotional about it, but I remember first thinking, was my computer recording what I was talking about that day? Because this was so bizarre. The guy barely even knows me, and I texted back. I said, what are you doing up at this hour? And he said, I'm in Romania. I'm on a different time zone. I said, why did you send me that message? And he said, I don't know. God just told me to tell you that. And I can define my life as before that moment and after that moment.
So, after nilang marinig message na ito, wala pa rin nangyari. Isang gabi nga na nag-evaluate siya kung ano yung mga hindi dapat niyang ginawa doon sa movie. Biglang may nag-message sa Facebook sa kanya na once in a year, o hindi man niya masyadong kakilala, hindi rin siya kakilala, pero nagpadala siya ng message na sabi niya, hindi mo trabaho ang magpakain ng 5,000. Ang trabaho mo ay ibigay ang 2 isda at 5 tinapay. 5 tinapay. So para maunawaan po nating mabuti.
Because I knew at that moment, as someone who was in control of a lot of things and who had vision, good vision for a lot of things, it wasn't my job for the results.
Wow.
My job was to get those 5 loaves and 2 fish and make them as healthy and good as they can be, and everything after that was up to him. And so at that point, I genuinely, for the first time in my life, was perfectly fine to never make another film.
Wow.
I was perfectly fine if God didn't have for me what I thought I wanted. I was joyful. It's the difference between joy and happiness. Happiness is temporary. Joy happens regardless of circumstance. And I genuinely had that joy that comes that you can't understand unless you have it. And I thought, I'm willing to not do another film. And of course, that may not be my choice, but I'm willing to not do it. And that's why, a couple months later, I poured myself into an.
So, as we see, very powerful po yung revelation na yun, na it's not your job na napakainin ng 5,000. Your job is to provide for 2 fish and 5 tinapay para makakain ng 5,000. Kung tatanungin ko po kayo ngayon, sino po sa inyo rito kung may 2 isda siya at 5 tinapay, makakita lang siya na pakainin ng 5,000 out of that. Sinong magbibigay? Lahat po tayo magbibigay. Gusto kong makita yun. Ano? 5 list. Magkano lang yung tinapay? Wala man €1 yung mga maliit na tinapay. 2 isda, sabihin natin €5. In €10, sabihin natin, mapapakain mo yung 5,000. Actually, mga lalaki lang po ang binilang noon. Ano? Dahil may mga babae, kasamang mga biyanan, etc. Ang sabi po, nasa 25,000 to 50,000 ang pinakain ni Jesus noon sa pamamagitan ng 2 tinapay, 2 isda, 5 tinapay. So our job is to provide those 5 loaves or tinapay at 2 isda. It's not our job na pakainin ang 5,000 o yung 50,000. Wow! It's also the same, ano, hindi natin trabaho ang iligtas ang kaluluwa ng mga tao. That's impossible job sa atin po. Ang trabaho po natin ay ipangaral ang salita ng Diyos at hayaan natin ang resulta ng ginawa po natin. Ang Diyos ang siyang magbibigay ng resulta. That's powerful. Wow, 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 wow.
Short film for my church's Christmas Eve service, and it was about the birth of Christ from the perspective of the shepherds. And so that's what I poured myself into. And again, just this small loaf and fish for my church. And while I was making it, I had this idea for a show. I thought a show about the life of Christ could be interesting. And we can talk about that in a minute, but when I made this short film, I finished it, gave it to the church. This was like at the end of the summer, Stu, because we got it, we live in Illinois, and you guys know this as weather. You can't shoot too many things out in November, December. So we shot it on my friend's farm in Illinois. Behind his barn is where we shot this short film. And so about August or September, it got in the hands of a distribution company, and they came to me, and they said, "This is incredible. We really want to be a part of whatever you're doing." Again, short film for my church. They said, and I told them about my idea for a show, and they said, "Oh, we would love that. We want to be all in. We're all in on this show," and I was really excited. And then they said, "We want to raise the money through crowdfunding." And I got really depressed.
So, makikita po natin, is ready to, even not to make a film, ano ho, although yun ang passion niya, ang concern lang siya kung anong gustong ipagawa ng Panginoon sa kanya after he received that revelation. My job is to give the 2 fish at 5 tinapay to feed the 5,000 or the 50,000. So gumawa po siya ng isang short film about the birth of Jesus. Panoorin niyo po, napakaganda rin, ano, at may nakakitang distributor at inoffer na naman po siya na gumawa ng movie or show na naiinisip niya about Jesus. So pagpatuloy po natin.
Because crowdfunding rarely works. It's usually for very small projects, and the all-time crowdfunding record was 5.7 million for a project that was famous. Like all the projects in the top 5 crowdfunds of all time for media projects are famous shows or movies that had a big fan base. We had nothing, and I was coming off of a big bomb. Loaves and fishes, man. It's not my job to feed the 5,000. I was in that loaves and fishes moment, and that's why I was open to it. I had nothing to lose, and I had everything to gain from the understanding that this isn't up to me.
So, makita po natin na may nag-offer sa kanyang distributor, pero ang sinabi sa kanya, gawin nating crowdfunding. Na ibig sabihin po, yung puhunan ng film na gagastusin po nila ng milyon-milyon ay manggagaling lamang sa mga taong manonood or masses, ano ho, upang suportahan. And then yung pinakamataas na nangyari pong crowdfunding is 5.7 million. Ayun ay talagang mga high-end film na po ang pinroduce po nila at kumita. Samantalang ako, sabi niya, galing ako sa isang kapalpakan o isang movie na hindi siya nagkaroon ng success. Sino yung magtitiwala? Parang, but I have learning now, sabi niya gano'n, kung anong ibig sabihin ng short film lang ang ginawa ko, and yet may nagkaroon ng interest. Yun po yung, I'm giving my 2 fishes and 5 bread, and si Lord ang bahala. Pakinggan po natin.
I'm perfectly okay regardless of what happens. So what? I honestly thought, I've said this before, I thought we'd raise $800. And eventually, again, long story short, we ended up raising over $10 million from over 19,000 people around the world, all based on that little short film that I did for my church.
Yes. Wow. Okay, dahil dun sa short film, which is i-consider that short film na yun ang kukunti nga lang naman, ano, short film na 5 tinapay niya at 2 isda na in-offer ko sa church ko, yung film na yon, ano ho, and then now they are offering me to have this opportunity to make another film about Jesus, yung idea ko, sabi niya ganon, and ang ganda po, ano ho, na mapapanood po natin ngayon na sinabi niya na aba daw yung nagkaroon po sila ng counting dun sa mga nagsusupport sa kanila. Tumabot ng 10 million. Nalampasan pa nila yung mga ibang mga nag-produce ng movie. 5.7 million lang ang na-produce nilang crowdfunding. Siya, breaking the record po. Ano, so, God is doing the impossible math by giving your short film or 5 tinapay o 5 isda. God can increase that. 10 million, imagine. Ano, na sumuporta sa kanya. $10 million ang nagbigay po.
And I remember when we were sitting at the computer and the number hit that 10 million mark, which was
Yes.
enough to do a full season. Like a lightning bolt, it hit my wife, and she looked at me in tears in her eyes and said, "I do impossible math."
I do
That's
the
what that
impossible
meant.
math.
Because we didn't know what it meant, because it certainly didn't add up for a long time. Done by
Hallelujah.
these great
Thank you, Lord. Thank you, Lord. So, napakaganda po, ano. Panoorin niyo po yung buong interview niya sa YouTube. But I want you to encourage, ano ho. Babasahin po natin yung talatang nangusap po sa kanilang mag-asawa sa John chapter 6, 8 and 9. Sinabi ni Andres na isa sa kanyang mga alagad at kapatid ni Simon Pedro, mayroon po ritong isang batang lalaki na may dalang 5 tinapay at 2 isda. Subalit, sasapat kaya ang mga ito? You see, it's ang nakakita po ng tinapay ay si Andrew or Andres, na kapatid ni Pedro. Ano ho? Yun po yung ano natin ang maghanap lang tayo ng 5 tinapay at ibigay kay Lord at 2 isda. Yun po yung trabaho po natin. And sabi nga po ni Dallas Jenskin, yun ang trabaho ko. To provide the 2 fishes and the 5 bread at si Lord na ang bahala sa resulta. You see, mga kapatid, God is not asking for you to do so much. God is not asking for you to do so much na ubusin mo ang oras mo sa mga bagay-bagay ano, na minsan wala naman doon ang kamay ng Diyos. Maybe, tignan po natin, ano, sa ating paglilingkod sa Panginoon, sa ating pagsimba, kapag may physical gathering po natin, 2 hours maximum ang ating in-spend. Yun lang hinihingi naman ni Lord sa iyo. Yun ang 2 isda natin o 5 tinapay. Sa cell group po natin, 1 oras lang tayo. Sa pag-engage sa prayer, araw-araw, kung kayo nag-engage sa Christ in You prayer meeting po natin sa online, 1 hour din lang po. So, 5 oras lang yon sa isang linggo. O halimbawa, ikaw ay workers, magpa-practice ka, halimbawa lang to. O halimbawa, binibigay mo yung another 2 hours mo for practice para ma-enhance ang iyong ang iyong talento. Or maglaan ka rin ng 1 oras para sa yung spiritual enrichment. So, wala pang 10 hours po yun. Nasa 8 hours ka pa lang. Maaring yun po yung 2 pieces na 2 fishes and 5 breads natin na pwedeng ibigay sa Panginoon. Maaring ito yung 2 isda natin, sigurado yung kaloob natin sa Panginoon. Yung tithes and offering natin kay Lord. And maaring 1 verse na devotion ang inihiling sa iyo ni Lord. O maaring 1 kaluluwa na ipananalangin mo para maligtas, madala mo sa church this year. Maaring 1 phone call ang inihiling ng Diyos. O maaring 1 tapik sa balikat ng mga kapatiran na nanghihina at kailangan ang iyong encouragement. Maaring 1. Yan ang mga isda po natin na pwedeng ibigay. I think, brother and sister, it's about time to all of us na makuha po natin itong mensaheng ito. My job is not to feed the 5,000 o gawin yung malalaking bagay. My job is to do what God asked me to do. Ibigay ang tithes ko. Mag-devotion ako. Mag-involve ako sa ministeryo. Ipangaral ang salita ng Diyos. And let the result ay iwan po natin sa Panginoon. Amen po. I hope you have been blessed sa ating maikling mentoring. Ano po, kaya hindi nyo pong mapanood yan, please watch The Chosen. It's a very good movie. So dito na po natapos ang ating mentoring at ipopost ko na lang po kung ano po yung tanong natin. Itatanong ko sa inyo para pag-usapan po natin mamayang magkikita po tayo. God bless you all po.